What is real and what is not? That is the biggest question in the crypto world right now, and especially in the XRP and Ripple community. Every day there's a new claim, a new screenshot, a new rumor, or a new inside source telling people that XRP is secretly trading for thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on some hidden private ledger. This has created a lot of excitement, but also a lot of confusion, and that is exactly why we are talking about this today. Welcome back to Solomega Machine, the channel where we break down complicated finance and crypto topics in a simple, clear, and realistic way. If you are serious about understanding the future of digital assets, payments, and real-world use cases of crypto, then you are in the right place. Before we go any further, make sure you hit that like button and share this with someone who is also interested in crypto truth instead of hype, because what we are about to discuss will clear up a lot of misunderstandings. Recently, there have been claims that on some private ledgers, XRP has been seen trading as high as $327,000 per token. Now, that number alone is enough to make anyone stop and think. Imagine what that would mean for the average holder. But the real question is not whether that number is exciting. The real question is, where did this information come from, and is there any real evidence behind it? The truth is, there is a lot of fun speculation and straight-up misinformation floating around about private ledgers. Some people genuinely misunderstand what a private ledger is, and others purposely twist the information to build hype or sell a dream. The first serious discussion about private ledgers connected to the XRP ledger really started when Ripple confirmed that it had developed and tested a private version of its technology around 2021. This was not a secret. In fact, it was mentioned in interviews on Ripple's own website and in official reports. The reason for this was simple. When Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies came out, they were based on fully public blockchains. Every transaction could be seen by everyone. While this level of transparency is great for decentralization, it is not ideal for banks and large financial institutions. Banks do not want the world seeing their internal transfers, their business deals, and the movement of billions of dollars. It is not just about privacy, it is also about security and business confidentiality. Brad Garlinghouse himself once shared a real story about this. Ripple had partnered with a very large bank in the Middle East, and when they started using blockchain-based solutions, that bank was shocked to find out that its transactions could be viewed on a public ledger. The bank basically said, "Wait a minute, people can see my transactions. I do not want that." And that is when the reality hit home. While blockchain is powerful, not every institution is ready or willing to work fully on a public network. This is where the idea of a private ledger becomes important. A private ledger can work like a temporary controlled blockchain between two or more banks. It can use cryptography, security, and speed, but still keep sensitive information out of the public eye. Another important name in the XRP space, Linda P. Jones, has also pointed out that many people now believe Ripple has created private ledgers specially designed for central banks and potential future CBDCs or central bank digital currencies. Even Ripple's own website has mentioned that it is piloting a private version of the open-source XRP ledger to allow central banks to create and manage digital currencies. This does not mean that there is a secret new XRP or that there are two completely different versions of the same coin. It means that the same technology, the same code base, is being used in a more controlled environment for testing, development, and future financial systems. So already in the beginning of this discussion, we can see one important fact. Private ledgers are not magic money machines. They are serious testing environments for banks, governments, and large institutions to understand how blockchain technology can work at a massive scale. They test speed, transaction volume, security, and efficiency. That does not automatically mean that the price you see on a private system is the real price of XRP. In fact, as we will explore more, value differences only happen when there is friction, restriction, or isolation from open markets. One of the most important voices in this entire discussion is David Schwartz, Ripple's Chief Technology Officer, because he is not just a commentator, he is one of the main architects behind the XRP ledger itself. When he speaks, it is not opinion based on emotions or hype. It is based on how the technology actually works. And what he has said about private and public ledgers clears up a huge misunderstanding that many people in the community still have today. The biggest question people keep asking is simple. Will the value of XRP on a private ledger be different from the value of XRP on the public ledger? According to David Schwartz, the answer is very clear. In a normal and healthy system, the value should be almost the same or at least very, very close. To help people understand this, he gave an example that most crypto users are already familiar with. When you buy Bitcoin or XRP on Coinbase or any other centralized exchange, you are not actually interacting directly with the blockchain. What you get is basically an IOU from that exchange. The coin is held in their system on their private ledger. But even though it is on a private system, the price you pay is almost exactly the same as the price on the real blockchain. Why is that? Because it is very easy to move assets in and out of the exchange. If the price was much higher on Coinbase than on the public blockchain, traders would instantly move coins from the cheaper place to the more expensive place and make a profit. That action alone would quickly balance the price. This process is called arbitrage, and it exists in every healthy free market. David Schwartz explained that the only way you can have a big difference in price between a private ledger and a public ledger is if there is a lot of friction. Friction means restrictions, controls, legal barriers, or technical limitations that stop people from moving assets freely. He gave a real-world example of this when he talked about the kimchi premium. In the past, there were times when Bitcoin or XRP was trading at a much higher price in some Asian countries compared to the rest of the world. The reason was not because it was more valuable there in reality, but because there were capital controls and restrictions. People could not easily move money in and out of the country. That friction caused a price difference. But this kind of situation is not healthy or normal. It is actually a sign that something in the financial system is not working properly. The true value of XRP is connected to its ability to move freely and access global liquidity. That is the entire value proposition. If someone tells you that their XRP can only be used in one place, or only on one system, or only for one type of purpose, that actually makes it less valuable, not more. Think of it like gold. Gold is valuable because it can be used anywhere in the world for many different purposes. If someone sold you a piece of gold and said you can only use this for making jewelry, nothing else, you would not want it as much. The power of gold, just like the power of XRP, is its universal nature. David Schwartz also made it clear that Ripple is not creating a second version of XRP for private ledgers. There is not a secret XRP that is separate from the main one. There is only one real XRP on the XRP ledger main network. What Ripple has done is create privatized versions of the XRP ledger technology for institutions to test, study, and experiment with. These private ledgers are basically copies of the system, not new currencies. They help banks understand how they could move trillions of dollars using this technology in the future without exposing sensitive information to the public right now. Another key point he made is that most transfers already happen on private systems today. Even now, when people think they are using crypto in a public way, many of their transactions never actually touch the public blockchain. They happen inside exchanges, inside banks, and inside payment platforms. But what makes crypto powerful is that if you want, you still have the option to move it onto the public ledger. That option is what gives the asset real value and real freedom. So when people say that XRP is secretly trading for absurdly high prices on a private ledger, it is important to understand this. Unless there is extreme friction or isolation, that kind of price difference would not last. The market would naturally balance itself out. In a realistic scenario, private and public values of XRP should remain very close to each other. Over time, several people in the XRP community have come forward claiming that they have personally seen extremely high prices for XRP on private ledgers. Numbers like $10,000, $50,000, and even $327,000 have been mentioned in interviews, live streams, and short videos. For many investors, this kind of information is both exciting and confusing. It creates a powerful emotional reaction. People start to imagine a future where XRP suddenly jumps from under $1 or a few dollars to life-changing levels. But as a professional finance and crypto analyst, it is important to slow down and analyze what those prices might actually represent. First, we need to understand what a private ledger is really used for in an institutional environment. Banks and financial institutions do not use private ledgers for speculation the way retail investors do. They use them for testing, simulations, performance measurements, and stress tests. These tests are designed to answer important questions. Can the network handle very large transaction volumes? How does it behave when moving trillions of dollars in value? How stable is it under heavy load? How fast are settlements when the system is pushed to its limits? In these environments, numbers are often adjusted manually or programmatically to represent certain scenarios. For example, a bank may set the value of XRP extremely high just to see how the system handles massive value transfers with minimal actual movement of tokens. That means a displayed price like $327,000 on a private ledger does not automatically mean that the real-world market has priced XRP at that level. It could simply be a parameter in a test. Think of it like a flight simulator. In a simulator, a pilot can practice flying at speeds that are impossible for a normal commercial plane. But that does not mean the real plane can or will ever go that fast in reality. It is done to test systems' limits and responses. A private ledger is similar. It is a controlled environment designed for learning, not for real market discovery. Another important factor is that these private ledgers are not open markets. There is no free buying and selling by millions of people around the world. There is no true supply and demand mechanism. The open market price of any asset is discovered through the interaction of buyers and sellers in a public environment. On a private ledger, that mechanism does not exist in the same way. So even if you see a number on a screen, it is not the result of real global demand. It is usually the result of internal settings chosen by whoever is running the test. Now, that does not mean that private ledgers are useless or meaningless. In fact, it is the opposite. The very fact that institutions are testing XRP at such high values tells us something important. It gives us a hint about the scale of the problems they are trying to solve. If a bank is testing XRP at extremely high valuations, it suggests that they are thinking about moving very large amounts of money using this technology. They are not treating it as a small or irrelevant tool. They are treating it as a possible backbone for future financial infrastructure, and that alone is very powerful. At the same time, there is also a psychological element here. People love big numbers. When someone hears that XRP was seen at $327,000 on a private ledger, many assume that this is some kind of hidden true price that will one day be revealed. But a mature investor knows the difference between a test environment and a live environment. A test value is not the same as a market value. A test speed is not the same as a normal speed. A test price is not the same as a real price. It is also important to remember that Ripple and its partners operate under strict legal and regulatory frameworks. They cannot simply flip a switch and reprick XRP globally at a massive number without causing chaos. Any real change in value will come from adoption, integration, regulation, and real-world usage over time. Prices increase because more people and institutions need the asset and are willing to pay more for it. That is how every asset in history has gained value. So, while stories about extremely high XRP prices on private ledgers are interesting, they should be viewed with a neutral and analytical mindset. They are not proof of a guaranteed future price. They are more like signals that big players are seriously experimenting with this technology. They show interest, curiosity, and potential. But potential is not the same as reality. Now, let's talk about this idea of a merge between the private ledger and the public XRP ledger, because this is one of the most misunderstood and overhyped topics in the entire XRP community. Many people imagine this merge like two completely separate worlds suddenly becoming one, and once that happens, the price of XRP will magically explode overnight. But in reality, the process is far more complex, far more controlled and far more dependent on regulation and real-world implementation than people realize. First, we need to clear up an important point. There's only one true XRP ledger mainnet. There is only one real XRP asset. Private ledgers created by Ripple or tested by banks are not separate XRP universes. They are basically copies or customized versions of the same technology running in a controlled permissioned environment. They are built using the same codebase, but they are not the same network as the public XRP ledger. Think of it like a private road connected to a public highway. The road and the highway use the same type of concrete and design principles, but they are still controlled and operated differently. The reason private ledgers exist at all is because banks and governments care a lot about privacy, control, and compliance. They cannot just put all their customer information and internal operations on a public blockchain that anyone in the world can see. That is one of the main reasons why many banks stayed away from cryptocurrencies in the beginning. They loved the speed and efficiency, but they hated the lack of privacy. So, Ripple created a solution that gives them the best of both worlds: blockchain technology with institutional-level control. Now, when people talk about a future merge, what they really mean is interoperability. They mean a world where private ledgers can smoothly communicate with the public XRP ledger, and value can move between them without friction. This does not mean that all private transactions will suddenly become public. It means that when a bank or a central bank needs to move value outside of its private network, it can use XRP as a bridge asset on the public ledger and then move that value into another private network on the other side. For this to happen on a large scale, a few major things must be in place. First, regulation has to be clear. Governments and central banks need a strong legal framework that defines how digital assets are classified, taxed, monitored, and reported. Without this clarity, institutions will not risk large amounts of money on a system that could change overnight due to a political decision. They need stability, predictability, and legal protection. Second, the technology has to be proven at scale. It is one thing to run tests in a controlled environment between two banks. It is a completely different challenge to run a global payment system that supports hundreds of banks, multiple countries, and massive transaction volumes 24 hours a day. The system must be secure, fast, and reliable at all times. There is no room for frequent downtime or errors. Even a few minutes of failure in the traditional banking world can cost millions of dollars. Third, trust needs to be built over time. Big financial institutions do not move fast. They are extremely cautious, and for good reason. The current financial system, as flawed as it is, still moves trillions of dollars every day. To convince them to change their infrastructure, they need years of successful testing, pilot programs, and real-world results. That is why Ripple has been working with banks, regulators, and governments, slowly and carefully, instead of trying to rush everything. If and only if all of these conditions are met, then we could start to see a deeper and more meaningful connection between private ledgers and the public XRP ledger. And if that happens, then yes, the demand for XRP as a bridge asset could increase significantly. But that increase would come from actual usage, not from hype or social media rumors. It would come from trillions of dollars in value moving through the system and requiring liquidity. This is why it is important to be patient and realistic. The merge is not some secret event with a hidden date on a calendar. It is a gradual process driven by regulation, adoption, and trust. Anyone who tells you they know the exact day it will happen is not being honest. The truth is, this kind of transition happens in phases over years, not in one dramatic moment. Now let's dive into CBDCs or central bank digital currencies and how they connect to Ripple and XRP. This is one of the most talked about topics in the crypto world because it's where the future of money, banks, and digital assets intersect. Over 90% of central banks worldwide are exploring CBDCs, and they all have similar goals to improve payments, efficiency, reduce costs, and provide a digital alternative to cash. Ripple's technology, including the XRP ledger, plays an important role in this exploration. But there's a lot of confusion about whether XRP itself is being directly used in these private CBDC ledgers. So let's break it down clearly. The Ripple CBDC platform allows central banks to create, manage, and distribute their own digital currencies. Banks can integrate it seamlessly with their existing infrastructure using standard APIs. They can mint digital currency, distribute it to commercial banks or even directly to consumers, process transactions, and control the monetary supply. All of this happens in a private, regulated, and secure environment. The system can settle transactions in seconds with minimal costs and a low carbon footprint. This is powerful because it provides banks with all the benefits of blockchain technology: speed, transparency, and efficiency, without exposing sensitive data on a public ledger. Now, here's the key point. The private ledgers used for CBDC testing are built using the XRP ledger codebase, but they are not the public XRP ledger. XRP can be used as a bridge asset to facilitate liquidity between different systems, but it does not mean that CBDCs are literally running on the XRP mainnet. David Schwartz has clarified this multiple times. The private ledgers are essentially trial environments or replicas that allow banks to experiment, stress test, and understand the technology without affecting the public market or XRP price. These private ledgers are isolated environments, which is why we sometimes see absurdly high test prices, like $420 or even $327,000 mentioned in community clips. The purpose of these tests is to show banks what is possible. For example, imagine a bank wanting to move billions of dollars daily. Doing this on a public ledger might be risky or expose sensitive information. Using a private ledger lets the bank simulate large transactions, understand throughput, and manage liquidity safely. The XRP mainnet then acts as the global bridge when transactions need to cross institutional boundaries. In other words, XRP has real-world utility as a liquidity tool, while private ledgers allow institutions to experiment safely. Interestingly, these private ledgers are also a glimpse into the future hybrid model of finance. Not every transaction needs to be public. Not every transaction needs to be fully isolated. Banks will likely use a combination of private ledgers for internal operations and the XRP public ledger for external settlements. Over time, as regulation and clarity evolve, the transition between private and public environments could become seamless. But it's important to remember this is a process, not an overnight event. It will take careful implementation, pilot programs, and global coordination. The key takeaway is this: when you hear claims about XRP trading at incredible prices on private ledgers, you need to understand the context. Those numbers are testing scenarios, not market reality. They show the potential of XRP and Ripple's technology to handle extreme value transfer scenarios. They demonstrate confidence from institutions in the system's ability to scale, but they do not indicate an immediate change in the market price of XRP. So, what does all of this mean for investors, enthusiasts, and anyone following XRP closely? First and foremost, it is crucial to separate hype from reality. The private ledger experiments, the absurd price claims, and the clips showing XRP trading at hundreds of thousands of dollars are not market signals. They are tests. They are tools for banks, central banks, and large financial institutions to explore the potential of digital assets, blockchain technology, and future payment systems. Understanding this distinction is what separates informed investors from those who are caught up in speculation and rumors. The future of XRP is tied closely to its real-world utility. Its value proposition comes from its ability to act as a bridge asset for cross-border payments, liquidity management, and settlement between financial institutions. When private ledgers are used in experiments, they highlight how banks can use XRP to move value efficiently while maintaining privacy and security. This is not hype. This is infrastructure in the making. If these systems are widely adopted by banks and central banks, the demand for XRP could increase organically because it is the tool that makes these systems. work. That's a very different scenario from a sudden, unexplained price jump driven by social media rumors. Another important point is patience. Financial institutions, especially central banks, move very slowly. They are cautious for good reason. They operate in environments where trillions of dollars are at stake every day, and any mistake can be catastrophic. The private ledger experiments are just the beginning. Full-scale adoption, interoperability with the public XRP ledger, and integration with real-world financial systems will take time, careful planning, and regulatory clarity. As we have seen, even Ripple emphasizes that they are waiting for the proper regulation and guidance before fully merging private and public systems. This is not a limitation, it is responsible development. For investors, this means that the real potential of XRP is long-term. The short-term rumors about $327,000 or $420 prices on private ledgers should be seen for what they are: stress tests, simulations, or even playful examples used by community members or Ripple developers to illustrate concepts. The mainnet XRP is the one that matters in terms of actual liquidity, adoption, and market value. Understanding this will help you make better decisions and avoid chasing unrealistic expectations that can lead to frustration or loss. Finally, it is also important to recognize the hybrid future of finance that Ripple is building. Private ledgers, public ledgers, and XRP as a bridge asset all coexist in a complementary system. Private ledgers allow banks to experiment safely. Public ledgers provide transparency and liquidity, and XRP connects both worlds. This is how digital assets are likely to be integrated into the traditional financial system over the next several years. The technology is being stress-tested, and the lessons learned today will guide the adoption of blockchain in mainstream banking tomorrow. In sole conclusion, private ledgers are not a secret goldmine, but they are powerful tools showing the potential of XRP and Ripple's technology. They are an indication that banks and central banks see real value in experimenting with blockchain, digital currencies, and liquidity solutions. Investors who understand this can position themselves with patience and clarity, focusing on real adoption and real utility rather than hype. The future of XRP is not a lottery ticket. It's a carefully developed infrastructure that could become the backbone of global digital finance. Welcome to Boolean IQ, where we cut through the noise, focus on facts, and help you understand crypto and finance in simple, practical terms. If you've gained value from this breakdown, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because we will continue bringing insights that go beyond the rumors and hype straight into the reality of finance and digital assets.